Joining me this morning is Matt Ducey, Waimakariri MP, Megan Woods, Wigram MP. Good morning to you both, and thank you very much for your time.
Morning, both
Morning,
of you. Lovely
Chris.
to be here.
Thanks for your
Morning,
time.
Megan.
Let's briefly discuss the RMA reforms. There really is, Matt, first to you on this, a focus on pushing development harder, faster, less consultation, less regulation, greater focus on property rights. All the media releases that I got through over the last few days were overwhelmingly positive, perhaps with the exception of Greenpeace. So, should the general public welcome these reforms? If so, why?
Well, I think to your point, Chris, if Greenpeace is opposing it, it probably means it's pretty good, to be quite candid. Hey, look, governments get elected on what they stand for in a campaign. We had a mandate to reform the RMA. Look, in fairness to Megan and her team in the last government, they had made some development in the space. We were able to build on that. And quite frankly, when you look at some of the statistics that have come out of the bills going through the House as we speak, because we're under urgency here in Wellington at the moment, when you look at stripping out of over $13 billion worth of costs, improving GDP by around 0.5%, and actually up to around 50% of consents will no longer be required. And I'll just put to you, everyone who's had to go to the council and ask for a consent to do something, quite frankly, they should be allowed to do in their house, they'll see this as a great win for everyday Kiwis. And I think that's why largely it's been supported across the House.
Megan, are you broadly in support of these changes?
Well, yes, and I think largely all the words that Matt just said, you probably could cut to clips of David Parker when we introduced our RM reform when we were in government. There's a lot of similarities between. I don't think there's any, in terms of the big problem, any differences. I think probably the concern that we have is the government has spent 2 years coming in, ripping up the RM that we had, and then going in and kind of reinventing the wheel on this. We've wasted 2 years. There simply could have been some changes made. They don't have to agree with everything that we did. They could have made changes that would have been a lot quicker. But fundamentally, I think one of the most important things that people want to see on this is some bipartisanship, so that people know they can get on with their developments, and that there's not going to be a government that comes in and has the theatre of ripping up a piece of legislation and putting their own in when there's some, cigarette papers between some of the differences.
Isn't this nice to hear? I feel like
But
you
we
two
don't
should...
agree with everything. I don't want you to get carried away. I think the Christmas spirit's
Yeah,
overtaking
look,
you.
Megan,
But it's nice to hear. But seriously, this is nice. I wasn't expecting that comment from you, Megan. This is actually nice to hear that there's a general consensus here. That
There are some
the
things we don't
majority of
agree
the...
with. Yeah, there are
Yeah,
some
but
things we
Chris,
don't
sorry to
agree
ruin
with.
the party
Hang
and
on,
the.
Matt.
Hang
I'll
on, Matt.
finish this.
Go on, Megan.
Chris Hipkins was in Christchurch yesterday talking to a group of people saying, of course, there's some things we don't agree with. There's things that we do differently. But what we're not going to do is come in and rip up this whole piece of legislation and repeal it for the sake of repealing it. We'll simply make changes. It will be much quicker, and people can have that certainty to get on with what they need to do. And I think people really appreciate that.
Matt?
Yeah, look, sorry to ruin the lover. And I did give Megan a slight compliment, but she's taken an inch and turned it into a mile. I think you find this government's been a lot bolder. I mean, there was some issues with David Parker's fast track consenting that got played out in the Environment Court. We've come in and addressed that, but I just point to you around the reorganisation at regional and local government level. That they are bold moves that we've really listened to people, and quite frankly, many of your viewers in Canterbury shake their heads and say, over Greater Christchurch, Waimakariri, Christchurch City, Selwyn, and Ecan, why do we have four councils? And that just adds to duplication, costs and delays. So that's why we've signalled the end of regional councils. I think most people could see that coming, and I doubt too many people will shed a tear for Ecan. But equally, we've also set very clear guidelines and our expectations of how our councils now get together and look at reorganisation, because actually when you look at our current structure of 3 councils, I think moving towards a singular council is inevitable. How long would that take? I think it's a piece of string, and I don't necessarily have a view on that. But rather than a revolution, I think it's evolution as we look to consolidate around council function.
When you say 3 councils, who would they be, Matt?
Oh, I think when you look at Christchurch City Council, Selwyn and Waimakariri, it wasn't that long ago. I grew up in Christchurch. I was under the Waimaori District Council. Out in North Canterbury, we had separate councils with Kaiapoi and Rangiora. Through significant changes, they merged into one council. I think it is inevitable, but the time frame, I think it's got to take its due process.
I'd hate for
Yeah.
the Christchurch City Council to merge with Selwyn, because the Selwyn District Council seems to be doing everything right at the moment. They've got a fantastic mayor. Their processes tend to be quite transparent. They're quite open to the public, whether the council officers down there in Hereford Street think there's something a bit special. So I don't want the council to merge with the council in Selwyn, because they seem to be doing things right. Need to move on. This is my little wee
Hang
quip
on,
for the
just
day.
just on that,
All right,
because I
go on,
didn't
Megan.
get to say on that,
Oh, sorry,
Chris.
Megan, go
I
ahead.
a very nice pivot from Matt getting away of why they ripped up a piece of legislation for a bit of theatre, because of course everything he talked about, none of that's covered in the RM changes that we're talking about. They could have done that, and they could have simply amended the bill and got on with things more quickly. So nice pivot, Matt, to get to that bit of the talking points from the leader's office.
It worked to me. There you go. It worked. I'll send Matt the invoice, Megan. Don't you worry. Hayata College named in an audit with concerns over using $18,500 on this leadership course to Queenstown, where they went on the Earns Law. That all sounds very nice, doesn't it? Now, what the Auditor General's office said that there was no real clear business case for that. Matt, should schools like Hayata, and to be fair, there are many others that spent phenomenally more money than what Hayata did, should they be made to pay the money back, as the taxpayer union has suggested?
Well, I think we should be exploring that. I mean, to be quite candid, it's quite a damning report from the OAG, and quite rightly, it is an investigation into taxpayers' money. It is public money. And, Megan will know as much as I do. It is the front page test. So, look, we all operate within rules and settings as well, but it's also about the intent of the expenditure. And I thought it was very concerning that the Office of the Auditor General found that actually there wasn't enough evidence that the spending was linked to actually the intention of that funding in the first place around development. And I think there's still further questions to be asked here, and I would encourage the school to provide that evidence to the OAG, because people want to make sure we've got. I don't have any issue around professional development. And boy, do our principals do an amazing job as school leadership, and they need to grow, and that is part of being a leader as well. But when you've got the OAG pointing to a lack of evidence, clearly there's something to respond to.
I mean, I want to point out there are other schools that were spending a lot more money and going on weed trips to Hawaii to have leadership training. I mean, for goodness sake, come on. Megan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think what this points to is exactly why we have the Auditor General, and I think it's a really important part of how we do make sure that taxpayers' money is being spent how it's meant to. So the Auditor General goes through all public spending, and it does that at local government as well. So I think this points. What happens now? It's up to the Auditor General to follow that up, but also the Secretary of Education to look at this. And I think the other 18 schools that were highlighted in this, and as you point out, Chris, quite rightly, that there were some schools that had much higher spending than Hayata. I understand the reason for the Hayata one was that Hayata is quite a unique school, and that it was one of the PPPs, the public-private partnerships that was started. They were going down because there's another one in Queenstown, Wakatipu College, is also a PPP that was started about the same time. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not it was justified. That's exactly why we have these processes, and the Secretary of Education will be in a good place to follow up on anything that needs to be followed up on that. But Chris, one of the things I do want to highlight, I just hope that Hayata, given it was only one, and it certainly wasn't the highest of spending, it's certainly one that has been highlighted, that it hasn't been highlighted because they're a school that raised questions around school lunches, because I don't want to live in a country where if someone does put their head up and raise questions about something, a whole lot of stuff starts getting raised about them. And I don't think that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying I sincerely hope it didn't.
Well, those reports come out every year, though, don't they? At the same time.
They do, but what I'm saying is Hayata certainly seems to have been highlighted through the media. And they certainly were only one of 18, and they certainly weren't the highest spending.
No, that's absolutely true. I guess the reason why that was so concerning, I suppose, or why that was in the media was the other stuff about the food, which I was going to speak to, but frankly, I think we've had enough of Māori school lunches, so I'm not going to even bother with that today because we'll wait for the school's independent investigation. Won't that be lovely? I want to move on to the... Or should we? No, we won't. Want to move on to the Eagle helicopter. Matt, to you on this first. So I think we've actually got 2 police Eagle helicopters around Canterbury at the moment. And I've got to say, from just a layman's point of view, when I was out and about yesterday in Riccarton and I saw the helicopter in the sky, I sort of felt like giving it the thumbs up, saying, yeah, thanks, Mum and Dad, you're doing a great job. I felt safer, and perception's everything. What do you say?
Yeah, look, the first thing I would say is police tactical decisions are operational, and it is for the police to decide. I mean, if I could give you a view as a Cantabrian, I've talked about
Yeah.
maybe consolidation over Greater Christchurch within councils. The reason we're doing that, right, is because Christchurch has grown significantly after the earthquakes. Geographically, Greater Christchurch is larger, there's more population. So, I mean, for my view, it probably does make sense that the police now have the tools and the availability to traverse a lot more geography a lot quicker. And you would probably argue that a helicopter might give a jump over a few police cars at times. So I do think probably it does make sense. As the police need to navigate their way as far out as Kaiapoi, Rangiola, Rolleston and Lincoln as rather the CBD. I know there was a few concerns after the earthquakes with the trialling of the helicopter. People living in central Christchurch felt like it was hovering above them a bit. But actually, I think when you look at the police demands on their time, the ability for them to track an offender over a large amount of distance, it quite rightly seems that probably helicopters the one.
I don't want to say something I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that one of the new machines is a lot quieter than the last one that was trialled in 2000. I'm not sure about that, but that's the impression I get. It's a hard one, isn't it, Matt? Because what I do know is that this helicopter, or 2 of them now by the sounds of things, came to Christchurch to try and reduce youth crime, Megan. But ironically, the people that it was after, thankfully, one handed themselves in, another one was arrested in New Brighton, somebody the day before, I think, was arrested as well. And so the people the helicopter was supposed to try and get, by and large, been arrested. So I'm kind of getting the impression the helicopter is being used just for jobs that perhaps it wouldn't otherwise be used for. So it's kind of a catch-22. What do you say? Do you think we should have one helicopter in the greater Christchurch area, as you know, the likes of Selwyn does continue to be the fastest growing region in New Zealand? Do you think we should have it
Well,
here full time?
I think you raise a really good point, Chris, that we are seeing a spate of crime and youth crime in Christchurch at the moment. I know there's businesses in my electorate that have been in touch with me that have been subject to some of this crime. People are feeling quite unsafe. And I think just a reaction the other day, looking up and seeing that helicopter. Now, whether or not we have 1 or 2, that's a decision the police have to make. But I think what we can strip this back to, it's that presence that you talked about, Chris, that make people feel safe. The other thing that, of course, makes people feel safe is seeing police on the ground. And what we're also seeing is we're not seeing the number of police that National promised at the election materialising. We're not seeing those police come in. We've had that target kicked out yet again in terms of when we will get those extra police. I think that's also critical. We can't replace getting boots on the ground and cops on the beat with having a helicopter in the sky. That I think that the helicopter does have a place. I also, like Matt, would like to acknowledge that I think for some Christchurch people, it reminds us of some times post-earthquake, and then, of course, after March 15, the helicopter.
Yeah, it does a bit, yeah.
They kind of remind us some of those times that are quite challenging. And I know we've had calls at the office with people about the noise, and I don't think it's just about noise. I think it's about memories as well. So I think we do need to be aware of that. But look, if we can stop the spate of youth crime that we're seeing, we haven't got the extra police we were promised. If the helicopter can help rein that in, then of course that is something we should be using. It's a tool and we should be using it.
Full-time? Do you think we need one here full-time though, just quickly, both of you?
Look, I don't know in terms of the operations. I mean, I think what I'd like to know is if we actually got the police we were promised and that National made a commitment to at the election, would that reduce the need for it? Would we get that sense of security?
That's a fair. I thought you're going a bit political there, but I think that's a fair comment. Hey, just finally, you two.
Yeah,
The
can I
latest.
just respond to that, Chris? Just to say,
Yes.
I think the helicopter would complement the new beat police out in Christchurch City. As we know, businesses have reported a significant reduction in antisocial behaviour since the return of beat police. People are very happy with the visibility of the police on our streets now, which they hadn't seen in a number of years. So I think it's not only the helicopter, but our police officers on the ground.
Okay, quickly, Megan.
We got the extra police, so the crime's moving out to the suburbs. That's why I'm getting calls from businesses in Hornby. That's why I'm getting calls from businesses in Sockburn, because well and good you increase the beat numbers in the central city, but if you don't increase the overall amount, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
And we don't want that. Just,
No.
I bet your phone was ringing hot when you're in government, though.
just finally, latest political polls. There's been about 3 out. I think I've lost count now. Pretty much saying the same thing, that Labour and National is neck and neck. But of course, that's not going to be the winner on the day. Neither political party was probably going to be the winner on the day, because you'll need friends. Megan, to you, is now the strategy. I mean, I know weren't you the Labour Party campaign manager last time round, or was it only for the win?
No, I was 2020 and 2023, and I can tell you, sharing 2 campaigns is more than enough for any human being.
Yes,
so I am not the campaign chair this time around. Okay. I am, however, helping out in the campaign in Wicklow with our wonderful new candidate, Dominic Jenzik.
Right, I'll invoice you for that. So my point being was, it's going to be interesting in the fact that both political parties will need friends. At one stage, it was looking like it would be the Māori Party and the Green Party for Labour, but they both seem they're worse for wear at the moment, aren't they? So will the Labour Party strategy be to try and pick up as many Labour votes as possible, Megan?
Absolutely. We are out there, we're saying 2 votes for Labour, and our strategy every election is to maximise the Labour vote. You deal with the cards that the voters deal you after the election, in terms of how you try and put together governments. We are unashamedly, this election, like every election, out there looking for every vote for Labour.
Okay, Matt, I mean, Christopher Luxon's favourability polls are not high. The National Party is doing slightly better in some polls. You'll still need friends. You need to rely on ACT and New Zealand First, won't you?
Well, it is the party vote that counts under MMP environment. That's why, we'll be out fighting hard with our new candidate in Wigram, Tracy Summerfield, who's returning after doing an outstanding job at the last election. And, it is interesting, the polls. We've had a couple this week. I'd actually argue they were quite different. It is interesting that you can get 2 polls back to back that say quite different things. And I think that leads understandably to the confusion with people when they look at polls and start to say how credible are they when there's such a divergence. But the reality is, it is an MMP environment. We've got to get out there and fight hard for the party vote for National as well. We've got to respect democracy and see where the parties lie after election day. So we'll be focused getting out there and telling our story about why we need a national-led government again.
Just finally, yes, Megan?
I think Matt's quite right that polls can, on the surface, say quite seemingly different things, but what we're seeing is a real clear trend with polls. I mean, who would have thought 2 years out from Labour receiving the result it did in the 2023 election, that we would now be finishing the year with some polls with Labour ahead? I think what we're seeing is that people were promised a lot by National in 2023. I know in my electorate there are people voted thinking they were getting $250 a fortnight tax cut. It hasn't materialised. Their lives are getting harder, not better. And I think we're seeing the trend of the polls really reflecting that. And it's going to be an election where people are worried about their jobs, they're worried about going to the doctor, they're worried about the cost of living. They're all the kinds of things that they've seen National have actually made harder, not better for them.
It's that old. It's that old saying, isn't it? It's that old saying, isn't it, that oppositions don't necessarily win elections, governments lose them. And I think it's going to be a sort of a case perhaps next time round too. Matt, just out of interest, do you believe that, here's one for you, just finally, my good people, do you believe that when it comes to the debates next year with the political leaders, it will be Christopher Luxon versus Chris Hipkins, or do you think there'll be some change? You don't have to say who, I'm being kind here, or do you think there'll be some change? Go on. What's your thoughts?
No, I 100% believe it will be Christopher Luxon. Who it will be on the Labour side between Chippy and McAnulty, well, that will be interesting. But look, Megan was right about the trend line. The trend line of every poll this term of government has seen a return of a centre-right government. So I think she's right.
Okay, Megan, who's going to be debating each other? Will it be Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins next year, do you think?
Well, I don't just believe that it will be Chris Hipkins on our side. I know it will be Chris Hipkins. I think it's a bit desperate. You know, all the talk of coups. There's articles in the paper about what the machinations happening on the national side, and I think there are real questions there. Personally, we really hope it is Christopher Luxon.
Okay. What, who stays or goes?
No, that stays. I mean, I think what we're seeing is a prime minister that just isn't connecting with the public, where his net unfavourability, so the number of people who like him minus the number of people who don't like him. I can't remember a point in our history when we've seen a prime minister that just doesn't seem to connect with the New Zealand public as much as Christopher Luxon. It's quite extraordinary.
It's a fair comment, isn't it, Matt?
Well, we don't vote for prime ministers in New Zealand, as you know. We vote for parties, and every poll to date has shown the return of a centre-right government. I think, look, the left gets very focused on identities and personalities. We're just focused on delivering for the voters, doing what we said we're doing. RMA reform, a good example, and addressing the cost of living.
All right, we'll leave it there, you two. Nice to speak with you. Have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
Thanks, Chris.